Hey y'all, it's Katie, and today I want to talk to you guys about sales tax. I know it's probably the least fun thing to talk about, but let's get real. As handmade sellers, it's something that we have to worry about. And maybe we don't know where to get started because it's so confusing. And so I'm going to break down a few of the basic things that no matter what state we're in, we may be required to have. And again, I want to remind you guys, always consult with a tax professional when it comes to things like this. And find out the requirements for your state, because this is one of the things that is so hard because it varies so much from state to state. But there's a few things that are the basics, and so we're gonna kind of cover those today. So what is a sales tax ID? And if I'm looking down, I have some notes, so I apologize. Each state has its own rules and regulations regarding collecting and remitting sales tax. So we kind of talked about that. Each state has different requirements. So you should go to your state website and apply for a sales tax permit in your state. So sometimes they'll call them a sales tax permit. Sometimes they'll call them a sales tax ID. Sometimes you're required to have both. So go to your state website, check out the requirements for a sales tax ID. That's a great place to start. And typically a sales tax permit is something that's required by your county, okay? So you're gonna have to go to your state and your county officials to find out what your requirements are for collecting sales tax on your handmade items, okay? In most states, you can apply online and it's free and easy to apply for a sales tax ID. You should always include your sales tax ID when you're sending in payments, or if you're selling in person. So at a craft show or a vendor's event, you should always have your sales tax ID displayed, so that way the vendor or the county officials who are coming by and checking know that you have a sales tax ID and that you are collecting and remitting sales tax as required by law, so that way you don't get yourself in trouble. So sales tax IDs are usually needed to buy wholesale and also required to sell at craft fairs and sometimes to get a business license depending on your county. So next question, how often do I pay sales tax? So again, this is something that depends on your state, but typically sales taxes are required in 4 different payment methods. So you may be required to pay monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually. I know several states you only have to pay it once a year. And I'm going to give you guys some tips on not getting yourself in trouble with that, making sure you're setting aside that money so you're not spending it and then end up with a huge tax bill at the end of the year. And remember, when you're sending in those payments, make sure you're including your sales tax ID so that way that money doesn't go to somebody else. I actually had a student have that happen, and she had a heck of a time trying to get her money back. So they want their money, but they don't always want to give it back to you. And so make sure that you are including that sales tax ID and all identification methods. Most of the time, they're going to send you a little book. If you're not paying online, most states will send you a little book for tracking, and it has all your sales tax ID and all your information, the tax rates, and everything that you need to know on there. Check out the state's website regularly so that way you know that you are charging the proper sales tax rate. And that way, you know, it can change from time to time, especially in years when we're voting on different things, and especially your county sales tax can change as well. County sales tax typically only applies when selling in person. However, it doesn't necessarily apply when selling online, but state sales tax does apply normally when you're selling online, again, depending on the state that you are shipping to, not shipping from. Okay, so what is a Nexus? This is something you guys hear people talk about all the time. Well, you're not required to pay sales tax unless you have a Nexus in that state. So what the heck is a Nexus? Okay, so a Nexus is a significant presence, is the actual definition of it. And what that means is one of a few things. So one, you have a physical presence. And this is not like, this is an either or, not a all of. So if you have one of these things, then technically you would be considered to have a Nexus in that state and would be required to submit sales tax for that state, okay? So what is a Nexus? First, it can be considered a physical presence. So what that means is, for example, I live in Missouri, my business has a building or a location that I am doing business out of in Missouri, so I would be required to collect and remit sales tax for all handmade sales in Missouri, if Missouri required sales tax on handmade items, okay? So if you have a physical presence in that state, you are required to submit or to collect and remit sales tax for your state in which you have a physical presence. So what does a physical presence mean? So a physical presence can also be broken down into a few different ways. So again, if you have a location that you are working in, that can be considered your physical presence, right? But say you have a full-time employee in another state who is working full-time for your company, that can also be considered a physical presence. Having a warehouse in another state can also be considered a physical presence. So be aware of that when working virtually online with other people. It's something that you need to be cognitive of, so that way you know that, hey, if I have a full-time employee over here in Texas, then I may be required to charge sales tax on items that are being shipped out of and to, or that are being shipped to Texas. I may be required to pay sales tax on them because I have a Nexus or a physical presence in that state. Another form of Nexus is an amount of gross sales or meeting a certain sales threshold. Both of them mean the same thing. So typically what that means is that you normally, this is all states vary, so check out your state requirements and make sure you check out the sales tax guide. We'll make sure we put it in the notes for you guys below. But a Nexus typically is sales of $100,000 to $250,000. So if you have sold $100,000 to $200,000 worth of products to that state, then you are required to collect and remit sales tax to that state. So pretty much what it's saying, if you're selling a large amount of product to people in our state, then the state just wants to get the money that is due to them. So that's something you need to be aware of. And that's why typically when you're buying something from an online box store, a big box store, and that's typically why you're charged sales taxes, because that store has already met, or that company has already met their Nexus for your state. And unfortunately, that trickles down to you. Okay, so what are some tips for being successful when it comes to collecting sales tax? Because there's a lot of things that you need to know. There's a lot of differences and variances based off of your state. So first, check out the sales tax guide. It's going to break it down by state, and it's going to help guide you and give you some information based on your state, whether you're selling in person or whether you're selling online, and some information about selling on different platforms. So say, for example, if you're selling on Etsy, Etsy collects and remits the sales tax for you. Easy peasy. However, Shopify or your own personal website does not. That is something that you have to set up, and something that can take a lot of work. So I encourage you guys to check out things like TaxJar. Has a lot of great information and a lot of great integration tools. Shopify actually has apps already set up that you can connect with your store, and they will collect and remit that sales tax for you. So it's awesome. And if you're selling on Shopify, you set up your state automatically. You set up your state, and it's going to track all the sales that are in your state, and it makes it super easy. Now, it's not going to tell you how much you're going to pay. You're still going to have to figure that out based off of your gross sales, but it's going to tell you what your gross sales are for your state. So it does help just a little bit. So some tips and tricks for being successful when collecting sales tax, because it can be a little overwhelming and it can be a little confusing. So double check your state's percentage and your county's percentage yearly. Like I said, county, especially if you're selling in person, can change from time to time. Okay, add collection software to your POS system or your website. It just helps you guys streamline as much as you possibly can take the risk of error out of it, and just help make sure that you are doing what is required by state and local officials, and that you're not going to get yourself in trouble and end up with a huge tax bill. Okay. Also, my biggest suggestion is to set up a separate checking account. Figure your sales tax monthly, even if you're not required to pay it monthly, figure it monthly and set aside that money so you're not using it for other things. Some of us who are maybe not the best at balancing our checkbooks or knowing what money is actually profit can end up spending our sales tax, and then at the end of the year we might end up with a huge tax liability. So it's super important that you are setting aside that money that is supposed to be used for sales tax and not spending it. So making sure it's there for when you need to make a sales tax payment. Okay, make your payments on time, mark them on your calendar. Don't get hit with penalties and fees because you missed a payment and didn't pay it on time. I also don't recommend waiting until the last day, because if something's not right or you have a hard time figuring it out, it doesn't leave you much time to ask for help. If you're having a hard time figuring it out, always ask for help. Reach out to your accountant, and they, I'm sure, would be more than happy to help. You can also call your state's I guess they would be tax collectors, and they will often help you as well. Sometimes you might have to be on hold for a while, but they will often help guide you in the right direction and help making sure that you are paying the correct amount. All right, guys, make sure you check out the sales tax guide, as it'll help guide you state by state. I hope you guys have a wonderful day.